It's a good day in my kitchen because today we're making pie. I'm going to show you how to make a double crust blueberry lime ginger pie. This is a recipe from Bon Appetit that I will include in the description box below. And while the recipe as it exists is beautiful, I've made a couple of tweaks to suit my taste a little bit more. The first thing we have to start with is pie crust, and I will link another in-depth tutorial of pie crust here. But I like to make my mom's pie crust recipe, which has been in our family for a long time. My grandmother made it, her mother made it. I'm not sure where it originated, but it's definitely been the go-to for our family pie crust. And it's a pie crust that is vinegar and eggs. It's also written as a full shortening crust, so I have a stick or a cup of Crisco butter flavored shortening here. But I like to mix it up and use a little bit of Crisco and a little bit of cold butter. So the first step in this pie crust is to combine the dry ingredients, which is 5 cups of flour, a little bit of salt, and a little bit of sugar. The sugar is good for flavor, of course, but also because it helps the pie crust to brown. My favorite pie crust is a really golden brown, really flaky, a little bit sweet pie crust. And we're actually gonna add some demerara sugar on the top of this pie crust to make it even sweeter. The key to a good flaky pie crust is keeping your ingredients cold and not overworking the dough. So I've got some water on the bench. You'll see that it's ice water. And then the butter has come straight from the fridge. I find the shortening doesn't matter as much if it's refrigerated or not, but the butter absolutely needs to come straight from the fridge. You also want to make this pie crust all in one go and as quickly as you can. This isn't something that will sit on your counter at room temperature for a while and still turn out well. If anything is interrupting you, store everything back in the fridge. Keeping it cold is the key. First, I'm going to incorporate the salt and the sugar into the flour, and I'm just using my hands for this. My hands are going to be all floured anyway, as is my bench. Then I'm going to add the 1 cup butter flavored shortening right in, and this is where the pastry cutter comes in handy. So grab my pastry cutter and just start to cut this in. We don't want to take it too small, but I'm trying to incorporate the shortening into the flour a little bit so it's not just one big lump. So when the shortening is incorporated into the flour such that there's still some big pieces, but it's not one big brick, I'm going to start adding the butter. I do like to add the butter in about 2 additions, though it doesn't matter, you can add it all at one time. And then I just using my hands, and I'll use the pastry cutter a little bit too, I try to first coat all of the little squares of butter that I've cut in flour, and then I start to rub them with my fingers. Just rubbing them together, trying to make them a little bit smaller, get them incorporated a little bit. The goal is to end up with some small pieces of butter and some bigger chunks of butter. You definitely don't want it to be completely homogeneous, so big chunks are still okay at this point. The rest of our butter will go in. Again, just kind of coat it in flour. And then start working it through with your hands. This is a lot of pie dough. It's 5 cups of flour and 2 cups of butter or shortening. It's enough for a double crust pie though, which is what we're making today. Okay, this is kind of exactly where I want this pastry to be. And you'll see there's still some pretty big chunks of butter in it. It's exactly what we want. Dough is looking good so far. I gave my hands a quick wash. And next up, I'm gonna make the egg vinegar mixture. So I add a couple tablespoons of just distilled white vinegar to a measuring cup. 1, 2. Crack an egg into the measuring cup. And then whisk those 2 things together. And then, using our ice water, I'm gonna add enough ice water to get up to 1 cup. We're at about 1/3 of a cup now. Perfect, 1 cup. Okay, I likely will not add all of this vinegar egg mixture to the dough. I'm gonna add it really slowly, a couple tablespoons at a time, and start to bring the dough together. Best way to tell for me is to get my hands in. So after kind of a couple initial stirs with a fork, just get my hands in, and I think that's enough. You can see the dough has not fully come together. There's still a lot of shaggy flour in the bottom, but it's starting to. So I'm gonna pour this whole mess out onto my bench. Don't panic, this is what it's supposed to look like. So we're not trying to knead it so much as we are trying to just bring the dough together. So I like to just press it down, press it together, gather the shaggy bits, and then with just a little bit of working, comes together to form something that looks like dough. So I'm actually gonna separate this into two, top crust, bottom crust. Just do my best to separate it in half, and then work each of these into a disc. And you can actually see there's still chunks of butter running throughout. It's looking great. So because we want this to end up round, it's easier to roll something round into a round shape. So I'm just rolling these into flat discs off to the side. Same with this one. Wrap these tightly in a little bit of plastic wrap. And these are gonna go chill in the fridge for at least an hour. You can actually do this overnight, and these freeze really well too. So if you make a double crust and you only need to use one, toss the extra crust into the freezer. It'll freeze perfectly. Toss it in your fridge the night before you wanna use it. You'll have perfect dough every time. So these go into the fridge now for at least an hour. Okay, next step is to roll it out. And again, we're going for a top crust and a bottom crust. I'm gonna put a tiny little flour on the bench. So a couple of the pitfalls that happen with rolling out pie crust are it can crack, it can stick to the bench, it can get too warm, and I try to avoid all of those. But if you work with it pretty quickly and just realize it's quite forgiving, it's not that hard. So start with a circle. Any cracks on the outside, just kind of pinch those together using a floured rolling pin. We're going to this size. So when I invert my pie tin on top of the crust, I've got enough to cover with a little bit extra because it's got to fit down inside the pie pan. So here we go. Just start rolling. Try to address cracks as you see them. My pie plate. Yeah, that's close enough for me. So I've got off to the side here just a couple sheets of parchment paper and a baking tray, just to make sure they're easier to use. I'm gonna store each on its own individual sheet of parchment paper. If you're confident in your pie dough, you can just lift it up and transport it. But another way to do this, just gently roll it on the back of your rolling pin, like so. Pick it up all in one and roll it back out. Perfect. It's a little bit big for our cookie sheet, but that will be totally fine. Okay, next up, number 2. And then right back down. Perfect. And this whole thing is going to go in the fridge when we make the filling. So this is a pretty simple yet pretty special pie. The flavors are just awesome, and I actually like to bump them up a little bit. So it's 2 pounds of blueberries, and then I like to use 3 whole limes, their zest and their juice. And if the limes aren't very juicy, I actually sometimes use 4 limes. I like a really limey blueberry lime pie. And then ginger. I've got just a knob of ginger here. We're gonna use over a tablespoon, which is what's in the recipe. I also like to add a little bit of vanilla and then cornstarch and sugar. This pie needs to rest for several hours after it comes out of the oven, or you have blueberry soup. Another way that I try to prevent the blueberry soup and maybe set myself up for success in the firming up department is by adding a little bit more cornstarch than the recipe calls for. The recipe calls for a 1/4 cup. I add a 1/4 cup plus a couple of tablespoons. If you know you've got really juicy blueberries, you can even adjust that up a little bit just to make sure that your pie solidifies. The cornstarch is the ingredient in the pie that will thicken up the sauce to make it more of a jammy consistency versus a soupy consistency. So the first thing I'm gonna do is get our ginger and our lime in. So let's work on the ginger first. So this is a knob of ginger, and you can buy them whatever size you like in the grocery store, the vegetable section, at least in the US. And to use this ginger, you need to take off the woody outside skin, which is this brown part. The best way to do that is with a spoon. It works perfectly. Just hold the ginger in one hand, scrub the spoon down the ginger root with your other. This works better than a knife or something sharp. That outside skin really wants to come off. So you want ginger that looks like this at the end, and we're gonna grate this yellowish part. So using a microplane, just gonna grate the ginger directly into the bowl. Ginger has a tendency to dull microplanes, so if you've got the budget for a ginger-specific microplane, I'd recommend it. Perfect. I'm happy with that amount of ginger. I used almost that entire knob. Okay, limes next. I'm just gonna zest the limes right into the bowl. When you're zesting, you're trying to only take off the outside green bit, not any of the white. It's called the pith and it gets a little bit bitter. Don't panic though. If you get a little bit of it, it's not a huge deal. Lime number 3, mostly zested. Look at all that delicious lime. Now just run my knife through these and we're gonna juice them directly over the blueberries. Lime's in, ginger in. I'm gonna add a little bit of vanilla. Probably about a teaspoon. And then last but not least, sugar and cornstarch. And then using a big spoon, I'm just gonna mix these things together. And that is as simple as our pie filling is. So this is beautifully mixed, and I am convinced that one person isn't gonna get all of the ginger in a single bite. I know I've mixed it well. So this goes off to the side, and we're gonna go back to our pie crust and put this pie together. Okay, pie crust out of the fridge. I'm just gonna pull the top sheet of parchment off and the pie crust with it. And then all we're trying to do is transport this pie crust into this pie tin, and we're going to put it on top and then kind of slump it into the tin. We don't want to stretch the pie crust at this point. We want to be really, really gentle with it. So one way that I like to do that is fold it in half, get the pie pin as close as I can, and then just gently lift the crust up and over. And then quickly, we're just going to slump it down in. The whole goal is to just gently coax it into the pie plate. We're not trying to stretch it at all. Just a gentle coax. If you see any cracks, just use your fingers. Okay, that looks great on the bottom. We may have to do a little bit of repair there, but I'll use the top crust to ensure that we get this little part covered. Okay, so next step, blueberry filling goes into the pie crust. You're gonna use the juice and all, and it's gonna be very, very full. Looks perfect. You can see the little specks of lime running through. All of the blueberries are nicely covered in that cornstarchy, sugary syrup. So same thing on this side. Hold it in half, halfway over, all the way over. Obviously we have a lot of extra crust. I use a scissor and just leave about 1 inch from the pie plate. I'm just feeling with my finger underneath the pie plate, or underneath the crust to see where the pie plate is. There's a lot of ways to finish a pie. You can simply use a fork and mash the crusts together. There's all sorts of different fluting techniques, but I'm gonna show you the fluting technique that I have used since I was a little kid. The first part though is to make sure the top and bottom crusts are sealed all the way around. So gentle little pinch all the way around, just to make sure they're sealed. And then because there's extra pie crust, I like to fold it under a little bit. So I'm just using my fingertips to fold the pie crust under, making sure it's well pinched together. And I'm just folding it to the edge of the pie plate. So this not only gives you a kind of a pretty thicker edge to flute, it also just makes sure that your crust is fully sealed. So the way my mom taught me to flute a pie is to use my 2 pincher fingers and my index finger. Pinch with my left hand, push with my index finger. Pinch and push. So your index finger goes in the groove that your pincher fingers made, and that's your guide for how far apart your flutes go. And for me, it's okay if my pie looks a little bit rustic. I don't mind that at all. And there we have it. So fluted all the way around. Now this pie continues to be special. We're going to brush over the top some egg wash. This is just a beaten egg with a little bit of water. This helps the pie to brown. Okay, we're beautifully egg washed. So just a couple more really simple steps. So I'm gonna use some demerara sugar, which is this really grainy, brown looking sugar. You can find it in the baking aisle of your grocery store. I'm just gonna sprinkle it on top. This will give kind of a nice little crunch. It'll add to the golden brownness, make it a little bit sweeter on that top crust. And it sometimes makes it a little sparkly or shiny. And the last thing, in any pie that has a top crust, you need to cut vents. The vents help the steam to escape a little bit, and you can cut them in really whatever way that you like. This also would be opportune for a lattice crust if you want to do a lattice top crust. That's also a beautiful way to finish a pie as well. But I am a sucker for a little bit of crust in every single bite, so I love a full double crust pie. My traditional is kind of always to do just a few different lines, kind of bordering on the center in kind of a star pattern almost. And it's totally fine if it's rustic, it's fine if it's off center, doesn't matter at all. At this point, it's functional and you can make it as aesthetic or not as you like. Ta-da! Our beautiful blueberry ginger lime pie is ready for the oven. This baby needs to go on a baking sheet for sure because it has a tendency to boil over, and I like to just make my life a little bit easier and cover the baking sheet with a little bit of tin foil. That makes cleanup a lot easier. So this is gonna go into a 350-degree preheated oven for like 90 minutes. What you're looking for is for it to be boiling on the inside so you can see little bubbles coming through your vents, and for your crust to be golden brown. The cornstarch doesn't activate until it's boiling hot, so you wanna make sure that it gets that hot and that you can tell that it's that hot. It is many hours later and it is finally time for pie. This baby baked at 350 for about an hour and 40 minutes. I didn't have to cover it at all. It didn't leak except a tiny little bit right here, little drops. And it generally looks gorgeous and is going to be delicious. I made sure that it was bubbly before I took it out of the oven. And then I've just let it cool for probably like 5 hours now, so it should be completely cool and nice and thick. So let's cut into this pie. I cannot recommend this blueberry lime ginger pie enough. This is such a beautiful pie, and it's really a nice spin on a kind of traditional fruit pie. The lime and the ginger really add a nice zing to kind of those more traditional blueberries, and the demerara sugar on top of this egg vinegar crust is excellent. I highly would recommend that. It gives the crust a little bit of crunchiness and a little bit of sparkle, and it's really a nice touch. I absolutely would add more cornstarch though. You can see that the pie is still a little bit loose, even though I added almost double the cornstarch. So that's a good learning for this pie. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Please let me know in the comments below if you try this pie or what your favorite type of pie is. I'm always looking for new recipes. If you liked this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more from me, please subscribe to the channel. I would love to have you. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you here next time. Cheers!